take two. So I've been thinking about this podcast for a couple of years now. Didn't really know what questions to ask, so then I asked Mom and Dad to help write the questions. And so Dad came up with some of these questions with Mom's help, and that's where we're going to start. So, family life, that's where we're going to start. So, Dad, who are your favorite aunts and uncles and why?
Oh, my favorite aunt and uncle on the Tolman side were Keith and Mickey. And on the Bunnage side were my Aunt Doreen and my Aunt Joyce and Uncle Hirsch. And Uncle Parley, of course. He was not his favorite, but his Uncle Hirsch and Aunt Joyce, I think, on the Bunnage side.
Okay. Mom, how about you?
I really didn't have any favorite aunts and uncles either side. They were way, way older than us. But I did have one aunt and uncle that had a girl the same age as me. And so we grew up together, and we were together constantly. That would be Rian and her mom and dad, Aunt Jean and Uncle Mel Lishman. That's the one I'd have to say.
So we touched on this a second ago when we went through the first time, Dad. You never called Uncle Keith, right?
I think when we were younger, I did, but when we moved back to Hill Spring, started living in Hill Spring, Keith and Mickey became our best friends. And we went on trips together and with Al and Nana Campbell and were with us as well. But so it just seemed awkward to call them Uncle Keith and Aunt Mickey because they were our really good friends.
Did they have kids at that time?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So was that a little awkward hanging out with them when they had kids and you guys didn't?
Well, we had Todd, of course, by that time, and Derry as a baby when we were living in Hill Spring.
So did you call all the other Tolman aunts and uncles?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So how come not Uncle Keith?
Just because we were friends and close to the same age, and I didn't call Uncle Jerry and Aunt Diane Uncle and Aunt either because they were good friends of ours. They were, like Jerry was 8 years older than me and Keith was 10 years older than me. So.
Yeah. Which uncle did you not like the most? Yeah. Who was your least favorite uncle?
Oh, that would go without saying Aunt Mona's husband, Keith.
Oh, okay.
Prince.
Why is that? I'm just joking. All right. Did you have cousins that you hung out with more than others?
Oh, yes. When I was very young, I hung out with Evie and Judy, and we played constantly on Grandma and Grandpa's front porch. I remember that so well. And then later, as I got a little older, I started taking an interest in hockey and played hockey till the cows came home. Tom Majowski, Judy's soon-to-be husband, was a good hockey player. But Monty Rose, Aunt Mickey's brother, and Buddy, all of us played hockey.
Yeah. How much older was Buddy than you?
About 3 years.
Okay. Did you ever play in a rink?
When I moved back to Hill Spring, living in Hill Spring, teaching in Glenwood, I went over and played with the Pincher Creek hockey team, and I played in the rink. But that's the only time. Other than that, we just played the lakes and the ponds.
Yeah. Where did you play most?
Peterson's Lake, just outside Hill Spring.
Was it walking distance?
Yes.
That's why. Mom, how about you?
Play
a lot
with
of hockey?
Cousins? Yeah, play a lot of hockey. No, cousins. I really didn't have a lot of cousins that I played with, only Rian. And the only thing we did lots together was we horseback ride. We'd go horseback riding together.
Where?
In Hill Spring, we had a little pasture, and we'd go catch the horse, and we'd just saddle up, and away we'd go.
Do you remember, was hockey a big thing for everybody in Hill Spring at that time, or was that just
No, just a few of us.
And Uncle Barry didn't?
No. In fact, I have to tell you, Keith started teaching out at Fishburn, a little whistle stop across the river from Hill Spring, about 10 miles away. And I remember Monty going out and chipping a hole in the ice and flooding an area on a little tiny creek. And we called it the Fishburn Forum. We were Montreal Canadian fans at the time.
Wow. So would you consider, was everybody in the family religious at that point? Would you characterize them as religious?
No,
On
not
the Tolman
everyone.
side, would-
Grandma and Grandpa Tolman were very much so. My mom and our family were, and Eva wasn't at all. But I think everyone else were religious, eh, honey?
Yep.
In fact, Grandpa was the caretaker at the church in Hill Spring. I saw his paycheck. He made $85 a month.
Wow. What year was that?
That would be when I was probably 16, so 1958.
Now, I remember it was always funny to me when I would go to Grandma Faye's and Grandpa LeVar's house, and I'd see him drinking coffee like it was no big deal and not a problem for us to do. Did you have uncles and aunts that were like that on that Tolman side? Who?
I don't think so. Anyone that professed to be religious didn't. And
How about on your side, Mom? I mean, that was Grandpa LeVar. So did Grandpa Leo ever drink coffee?
Yes, my
Instant
dad,
Sanka.
He always said instant Sanka, but I'm sure Lil's Cafe didn't absolutely have instant Sanka for my dad every time he went in there. But
Now, do you think he was looked down on?
no, not really. Maybe from the religious side of Hill Spring, probably.
Were the Tolmans considered the religious side of Hill Spring when you were growing up?
Yep.
Was it a well-known family?
The Tolmans?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When you grew up there, everybody knew who the Tolmans were?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how to interpret the way you said that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were always classified as religious type. So my dad might have been
Little
thumbs
bit of a
down on
Jack
my
Mormon.
dad. Oh, who knows?
I think, if you really want to know, I think the Lishmans looked down on the Tolmans because they didn't think that they were, what shall I say, energetic enough, worked enough. Grandpa didn't have a very high-paying job. Before the church, he was a ditch rider for the United Irrigation District, so he didn't have a well-paying job. They didn't have much to have, except much to material things. Just a large family, 10 kids.
Wow. Now, Mom, what about your grandma and grandpa?
I never knew him.
On either side?
You knew
No.
your grandpa.
Oh, yeah, I knew my grandpa Lishman, but all of them were gone by the time.
Now, did
Yeah,
they always
mine-
have a really strong work ethic?
Oh, yeah.
The Lish always farmed, always ranching?
Yeah. Yeah. All of them.
Now, did you go on vacation a lot when you were young?
No. Went to Waterton, maybe on a Sunday afternoon after church, but I don't ever remember ever going on a holiday with my dad. Ever. And my mom. No.
A drive up to Waterton.
Drive up
maybe,
to
eh?
Waterton, maybe. But
What about you, Dad?
When I was younger, I think the only time that we ever went, would go camping in the mountains. And some of my fondest memories were going with my Grandpa Tolman up to West Castle, and there's a huge sawdust pile there. And we'd take our sleeping bags and sleep in the sawdust pile. Next day, we'd get up and go pick huckleberries in that West Castle area.
Wow, I've never heard that before.
Oh, is that right?
No. Have you ever shared that story before?
I
Slept
it's
in a
the-
sawdust
It's in the
pile.
book.
That's your memory of a great vacation spot.
And then the first vacation that we really took was in 1955 when we went down to, Grandpa wanted to see his brother, Will, in Whittier, California, before he died, because he was the oldest of my grandpa's family. And my Uncle Jerry was on a mission around the Monterey Peninsula. And so we went to California in 1955. Kelvin drove, and Grandpa Tolman drove. And because there are some stories that I share in the book about that was quite cute too. But we didn't take many long ones. We went, and after we got back in 55, the next one I remember in 57 when Jerry came home from his mission, we drove down to Salt Lake to pick him up.
Now, what about what's your favorite story about Grandma and Grandpa Tolman?
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Wouldn't be me.
Oh, Grandma was big as a house, and whenever lightning would strike, she'd gather us like chicks to the hen, and pull us into the far corner of the kitchen. I remember that far corner, and she would tell us ghost stories when the thunder and lightning was going on outside, and just as she'd get to the climax of the story, out would come her false teeth like this. And to try to scare us, but she was big as a house and had a heart to match.
Was she as big as a house by today's standards, or just back then?
Oh, today's standard as well. I mean, she was big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But the sweetest ever.
oh yeah, loved this unconditionally, and Grandpa Tolman had such a quiet demeanor about him. Mm-hmm. He just by example made you want to be like him.
Wow, that's a pretty big compliment.
Yeah.
I remember you telling a story once, the only time you ever heard him curse.
Yeah.
The cow's tail. What was that story?
I went out with him when he went out to milk the cows, and he had one of those little milk stools, that's just a T. He sat on that, and he just sat down with the bucket started milking, and old I can't remember, Cherry. Well, Cherry was the name of the cow, and whipped her tail and hit him right in the eye, and flipped back like this, and over went back off the stool, and the milk spilled on the ground. And he picked up the milk stool and he hammered that cow on the back end. He said, "You damned cow!" And then as soon as he said it, he turned back to me and looked at me, and he knew that I had heard him, and he apologized to me immediately. That's the only time that I ever heard my grandpa say anything untowards.
Wow. Did Grandpa kind of take over the role of Grandpa Al for you? Do you think you got more like kind of special attention from him? Were you closer to him than his other grandchildren?
Probably.
He let him work in the garden. Nobody else would.
Yeah. He
Nobody
kept
else
a
would
huge
touch him.
garden. Grandma and Grandpa kept a huge garden, and Grandma would always want me to go out and help Grandpa or go weed, because Grandpa was out ditch riding at the time, and I'd, like any kid, I have to get around to that one of these days, and then I can just see my grandma now saying, "Okay, I guess I'll go have to do it myself." "Oh, Grandma, I'm going."
She was a martyr.
That's how she would get me to go out and start weeding the garden.
Now, how about you, Mom? Did you ever hear your grandpa curse?
No, I had very little to do with them, really. Oh, only that we had a great big huge kitchen table in the middle of the floor, and Shirley and I would ride our bikes around that and around it and around it and around it, and my grandpa would just sit there and watch us, and then all of a sudden he'd say, "Why don't you girls just go down over there and sit down and surprise your asshole?" That came from my Grandpa Lishman.
Grandpa Alex.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I don't.
I
have
don't
any
think the
memory.
Lishmans were akin in opposition of using some crude language now and again. That wasn't the dangs and the hecks and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
And son of a bee, that was Grandpa Leo's favorite expression.
Did any of the Tolmans? Were any of them kind of rough around the edges?
No.
I don't think so. I don't. And even with their spouses.
Yeah.
The roughest, I would think, would have been Edwin, but it was more gruff than rough.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Did you ever hear? Did Grandma Tolman ever get mad?
I think she got
Frustrated more, particularly.
I don't think she ever got really, really mad, but she was the disciplinarian. Grandpa would never.
Yeah, Grandpa didn't.
Never discipline the kids.
Did they ever fight?
Grandma and Grandpa? Never saw them fight, ever.
How big was that house?
Well, we thought it was humongous, but I'm sure it was probably no bigger than
Wouldn't you like to
12
see
or
it?
1,300 square feet, I would imagine, just the way in which it was laid out. But there were 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, one bathroom, and a huge a living room, front room combination, and a kitchen that I thought was gigantic, but it Probably wasn't that big.
They had a nice big dining room in
Yeah.
the other room.
And you never heard them fight?
Uh-uh.
Wow.
No.
I never heard my mom and dad fight, ever.
Oh, her mom.
No, my
Her mom
mom-
was the sweetest thing in the world. She
They wouldn't.
never would buck Grandpa Leo.
Yeah, and he was so calm.
Yeah.
And where did Sheila come from?
Have no idea. No, I have no idea.
Really? Did they name any of their kids after, like, for any distinct reason?
Maybe my brother, because my
Jim.
dad's name is James Leo, so they named James Lishman, Jim Lishman, my brother, but none of the rest.
Your dad's name was Leo Alexander, not
Oh.
James Leo. James Leo was the son.
Yeah.
Leo Alexander was
There
the.
you go.
How about you, Dad? Where did your name come from?
My dad's had a young brother, 5 months old, that died, and his name was, they had named him Everett, and so they gave me that name, Everett Blaine, and called me Blaine. And I always disliked that name. I just didn't like that name until Cam and Lonnie and my Aunt Doreen and Aunt Joyce and Uncle Hirsch went out to Edwin, Manitoba, and then on to where my dad was born, and then on to Portage la Prairie, where there's a cemetery there, and they found his gravesite where he was buried. 5-month-old Everett Douglas was his name, and that's where Doug Levitt got his name from.
Oh.
Okay, and anyway, they went in and ordered a headstone and laid it at his graveside, and they dedicated the grave. And when they got back, they were telling me what a spiritual feast that was and how much that meant to him, and I suddenly started feeling very, very guilty about disliking that name. And now, of course, my kids say, "Are you crazy? That's a wonderful name." And one of my grandsons is named that. So.
So, how far did you live at Grandma Faye's house from the Tolman house?
Well, it depends on when. When I was really small, we would have lived about 3 blocks away. When, from grade 8 on, we were either living with them or in the house next door.
How old were you when Grandma Tolman died?
When Grandma Tolman died, she died in 72, 71, something like that. So I was.
We were dating.
What's that?
We were dating.
When Grandma died? No.
Grandma Tolman?
No, we were married when Grandma Tolman.
But when
You already had Darian Todd, and I would bet dollars to donuts that Todd remembers her.
Yeah. Oh yes. He would. He would.
Probably remembers the false teeth story. Now, how about you, Mom? How far did you live from your grandparents?
Brandon, I had no grandparents.
Well,
You did
you
so,
did too.
Alex.
Well, they lived.
Right in your house.
Oh, he lived right there with us. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close.
How come you never mentioned the Harkers at all?
But we didn't do a lot with the Harkers. My mom was the youngest of 14 children, and they were lots older than her.
Well, and they had passed away long
Yeah, a lot
before
of
you
them.
ever.
Yeah, a lot of them
ever
had passed
came
away
around.
before I ever come around. I hardly know anybody on the Harker side.
So her grandma Lishman, Alice, passed away in '39, and Mom didn't come along until 6 years later. So
Wow. And so,
But a very religious family, the Harkers were.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
now did you go over to Grandma and Grandpa Tolman's a lot as you got older, or was it?
We were right there living with them.
No, I meant when you and Mom got married.
When
Once you and Mom got married, did you visit Grandma and Grandpa Tolman much?
Let's see, yes, a lot right at the start, but then when they had their heart attacks and Grandma had her stroke, then that's why we moved from the house between, where Kim and Lori Schnorr live right now, and where, I guess it's the Barfus that owns, where Uncle Jerry and Aunt Diana built that. There's a log house that Grandpa Tolman built for my Aunt Eva. And then she married Paul Sash, my Uncle Paul Sash, and so she moved to Cardston. Well, that left the home available for us, so we moved from Cardston back to Hill Spring, and we lived there.
In the home that Grandpa built? The
Yeah.
log home that
Yep,
he built?
yep.
Was he like a handy craftsman guy too?
Yeah, he did a pretty good job of building the house. Anyway, I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't think of him that way, but my Uncle Keith was more unafraid to tackle any kind of carpentry business, and that's what prompted me to be a Mr. Fix-It type thing, and not be afraid to tackle stuff, kind of like Todd is. Todd is in our family. But anyway, so yeah, we would be over at Grandma's every day, mainly because Mom worked in Cardston when we were living there, and Barry and I would come home at noon to Grandma and Grandpa's place for dinner, and Grandma would always have dinner ready for us. Not much.
Yeah. Was she a good cook?
She wasn't as good as your mom.
No, Mom was probably better, but Grandma was good too. She
She did with what she had.
didn't have much. We just had vegetables, potatoes and gravy, milk gravy.
But still to this day, that's what you'd rather eat.
Yes, absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
roast beef and gravy. What did their house smell like? Did it have a distinct smell? I don't recall having a distinct smell in Grandma and Grandpa's Tolman's house, but I do in my Grandma and Grandpa Bunnage's place. And I don't know what the smell was, because whether it was a chemical toilet that was behind the curtains in the back, and she was also heavy into ceramics and pottery, and whether there was that kind of odor. And I can't even describe the odor to you, but I will tell you this, that when we went out and found Uncle Everett's grave, then we went to where the Bunnage home was in Edmond, Manitoba, and the gal that lives in there now invited us in, and I walked into her kitchen, and I could smell Grandma and Grandpa Bunnage's place, just as distinct as can be. Did that bring up emotions? Did you get emotional over that, or?
No, not really, because I wasn't as close to Grandma and Grandpa Bunnage, but it was certainly unmistakable to me. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, did your family have reunions?
Oh, did the Tolmans have reunions?
Yeah, lots. Tolman's always we got together. Bunnage's not so much until a little. Well, we weren't as close to the Bunnage family, which is so ironic because we were kind of joined at the hip with the Tolman side. But then when we moved back and started teaching, and my Aunt Doreen kind of enveloped us in, then we were part and parcel of their family, and ever since that time, and probably even much closer than the Tolmans now.
But Tolmans had a great place to have it. They had reunions every summer up at your Uncle Dean's.
Well, even
I went
before
up there
that,
before we were even married,
Yeah.
and stayed at reunions up there with
that's
everybody,
right.
and we
That's
all
right.
slept out and
under the stars.
Under the stars, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you obviously were closer to the Tolmans as a kid growing up, and then it kind of transitioned.
Yeah, I mean, we were still close to the Tolman family, all my cousins, but the Bunnages really, and when I say the Bunnages, probably Aunt Doreen's family,
Yeah.
of course, became our very best friends and our closest family.
So it wasn't really that way growing up.
No.
It was after you
no.
got married?
In fact, I don't believe that I even knew Lonnie existed until she was probably in grade 8, something like that.
What about Uncle Carrie and?
Yes, I knew them, but Lonnie was quite a bit younger, and so we'd be off doing our boy thing, playing. I'd go over to my Uncle Jerry and Aunt Zaza's, because Bunnages always get together to play rook. Mm-hmm. Kids weren't allowed to be in there because they had to make a noise, and Grandpa Bunnage was quite verbose.
They played rook at a young age too? Like when you were young, you played rook?
Oh yes, I didn't until we got more with the Bunnage side.
How about you, Mom? Don't touch this cord. Makes a lot of racket.
It's
Sorry. How about you, Mom? Did you play rook growing up?
We never played any games at my house, ever. Never played a game till I went to the Tomans.
I felt bad, Mom. It's like your side of the story is like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Did you
exactly.
play any games as a kid growing up?
Never.
Wow.
No. But you know, you were talking about reunions, and I don't remember a whole lot about Lishman reunions, but I'll tell you, my mom fed a Lishman every Sunday in her house. My mom's table always had a Lishman family around it.
Well, was your mom as anal retentive about cleanliness as you are?
Oh yes,
That's where you got it from?
probably more so than me.
Really?
Oh,
Yes.
no, that'd be impossible.
I would like to say, I mean, and I'm pretty particular about my whites, but my mom would hang clothes out on the line, white clothes especially, out on the line in the middle of the winter. And I never really realized why in the world, because you'd bring them in and they'd be stiff as a board. And then you'd have to lay them across all the chairs and tables and everything in the house to dry them. And I'm thinking, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But I know today the reason why is because the sun made them whiter.
Bleaches them.
And so in the
Natural
middle of the
bleaching
winter, my mom would hang out her clothes just to get them white. Crazy.
The probably not, I wouldn't say the first day after our marriage, but when early into our marriage, Mom made it very clear to me that she had this advice from her mother and she wanted it kept in her house. If you go to bed with a clean house, you wake up to a clean house.
Was Grandma Faye clean too?
Not to the extent of Grandma Margaret.
Yeah.
Nobody was as attentive as
No.
my mom.
No. I mean, she wasn't dirty, but cluttery, you know, that.
You know, it's funny because growing up, I always thought you were crazy anal retentive about cleanliness, and then I moved in with Aunt Shirley in college.
Oh, right.
Man, she was clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very, very clean.
Yeah.
Like just exactly how you were.
Well, Grandma Margaret passed on a tradition with her kids, and
Uncle Jim was really clean.
I'm not sure about Kathy, but Shirley
well, Kathy was clean, but she was so cluttery and not like now. But anyway,
You might want to cut that out, Brandon.
Yeah. You can't say was.
we haven't
She's
got
still
time
alive.
for that. No got time for that.
Right. Now, did you get along well with your parents, Mom?
You're asking me, Brandon?
Well, it's written here, so.
My mom was an angel. I always got along with her, but my dad was the disciplinarian, and he was strict. And you guys have all heard the story about the cellar and everything so I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
And-
Now, what about your mom, though? Were you pretty close with her?
Well, you know, Brandon, she was she was older, so it wasn't I'm not going to say that I had a wonderful memory of a childhood growing up because they were so much older than, you know.
How old was Grandma Margaret when you were born?
She was born in 1906, 39.
And so, and she
41
was,
for Aunt Shirley.
Yeah.
so we didn't do things. My dad was always on the farm, and so, you know, we didn't do fun things. And then Dad would come home tired, and it would just be to bed, and then up in the morning to do all the work over again. So,
Now let's talk about their bed arrangement.
Yeah, Mom, I do need you to put your mic a little closer to your mouth. Your mic just isn't picking you up as well as Dad. You can just lean in a little bit.
Or you can move the mic closer if you want to lean
how about
back.
that?
No. What about their living arrangements, Dad? Their sleeping arrangements? What were you saying?
Well, they got the honor of having not only Grandpa Alex living with them, but Uncle Rex Lishman, who was a bachelor, and he used to grade the gravel roads around Hill Spring and Glenwood, and he got a nickname, Curly High Blades.
What?
He was
Why?
he was bald as a billiard ball, and when he'd pass, that grader would pass over, it wouldn't take care of the washboard, it just smoothed the gravel over, you know.
Yeah.
So they called him Curly High Blades.
Curly High Blades. Wow.
With-
And how big was the house?
With our
heavens.
house?
Yeah.
Well, it was really funny because the house that I grew up in was my grandma and grandpa's house on the farm.
Yeah.
And they moved it to Cardston after up to Hill Spring after my grandma died. And so then that was the Lishman home. So that was my dad's home. It was Rex's home. It was LeVar's home. It was all, and so they felt like that was home to them.
Yeah.
So that's why Rex was there, and that's why Grandpa was there. And they had this great big huge bedroom, and Shirley and I and Ramona shared a bedroom that wasn't as big as a walk-in closet. It wasn't as big as your walk-in closet by any means. And
Wow.
Well, and how did you access it, honey?
and we had to access it through my mom and dad's bedroom, because that was just a little pantry off my mom and dad's bedroom. And so we just had a 3/4 bed in there, and Shirley and I and Ramona slept in this 3/4 bed, had one dresser and a thing behind the door that you could hang some clothes on, kind of a nail. It wasn't even big enough for a closet, so we just hung them on nails, on hooks.
Wow. Jeez.
We had a nice sized kitchen and a decent, in those days, living room, but it wasn't huge.
Well, I don't think the house would have been over 900 square feet.
And there was no bedroom for Jim. And so he slept in the attic, which was not finished. And he slept up there in the wintertime under 10 quilts, and then in the summertime he slept outside the door in a tent.
Tent house.
In a
no,
tent.
No, just a tent.
tent.
Yeah.
So
A
there
high
Mom
was-
wall
says I
tent.
love my kid more than making him sleep in the attic.
But what was interesting is to access the other bedroom, they had to go through the bathroom, and that's
There was-
where Alex and Rex slept.
There was no bathroom there for all those years that
No,
we
and then
lived there.
finally got a
But
bathroom.
to access the attic, you had to come through my mom and dad's room and
Yeah.
shut the door, and then open the door to the attic and go up. So it wasn't
And kids today think they've got it tough.
Yeah. Now, who is your favorite sibling, Mom,
my favorite sibling
growing up?
growing up. Well, when we were growing up, Shirley and I were at odds all the time. But
Like
for
Finn and Bella.
Yeah, but for sure now, Shirley and I are by far the closest. And I have to say that I really was close to Kathy. You know, when Blaine and I were married, we did I lived with them and went to school up there with Kathy and Danny, but she was more of a mother figure, because she's 16 years older than I am, so she was more of a mother figure than a sibling figure to me. But I always loved my brother too, because he was quite a defender of us, the girls. But
You guys didn't fight with Uncle Jim a lot growing up?
no,
Really?
no.
That's probably because he was too small. They would have beat him up.
Yeah, Jim only weighed 3 pounds when he was born. Wow. Mom said he slept in a shoebox.
Wow. What about Poo Dog? Sorry, I just wanted to get that in the podcast. Now, the next question here is, what was it like when you took your spouse to meet your parents, and how did they treat you?
Oh, Blaine's mom treated me like the daughter she never had. She was the kindest, sweetest, loving, and I wasn't known as the best girl in Hill Spring to be dating too either, because
Now, don't take that wrong. That's only because you were into...
a bully.
Got drunk so much.
No, she just would tease other... Well, the Tolman side, she teased Diane Caldwell, and Diane had
And
a
the
physical...
Tolmans didn't like me,
and
but Blaine's
that
mom
was one of the reasons. And so
it this
some eyebrows were raised when that happened. But as soon as I started dating Sheila and took her home, Mom just enveloped her, and so did Grandma and Grandpa Tolman.
I went up there many times before we were even married, and slept
with
with
Mom, yeah.
with Blaine's mom before we were married, and she'd lay there and tell me stories and stories and stories.
What was Grandma Fay more like Grandma Tolman or Grandpa Tolman?
Oh, Grandma Tolman.
But it sounds like Grandpa Tolman was very meek and mild as well.
Do you think Grandma Tolman was? Do you think your Grandma Fay was meek and mild?
Well, just kind. Just a heart of gold is what I
Oh, a
mean.
heart of gold, but,
No, but she
was
wasn't.
a defender
No
of
way
the
she was
faith. Let me
meek.
tell you, she was
She would be
she was
outspoken
feisty.
if she needed to be.
Oh, really?
Oh, she had
Defender
a
of the faith, we called her.
Oh, I know that. I just don't
Yeah.
ever remember her getting mad.
Oh, she was
She
feisty.
went to too many
and-
hockey games and too many basketball games, and of course, I never committed a foul ever.
Did she ever embarrass you?
Yes.
Yes, lots of times.
Really?
Yeah, 'cause
I never
I could
liked
hear her
to s-
groaning and complaining.
I never liked to sit on the bench beside her because she would yell at the refs all the time about her
She's quite
voice. No,
outspoken.
she had a feisty streak. She
But
could.
there was no shut up Artha moments.
No,
Anyway,
Now, what about Grandma Margaret, Mom? Do you ever remember her getting mad?
only once.
Really? Go on.
when she bought a table, and
No, she got mad at me.
Really?
Yep. Sheila used to sleep outside in a bed outside on the lawn. And
that was in the
this
summer.
one Sunday afternoon, we went out on the bed. We were, by that time, dated, quite steady and thinking of marriage. And we laid down on the bed and we're talking because it's in full view of the street, of the house and everything. And then the wind picked up and it started to get chilly, so we just threw a blanket over us. Well, she comes storming out there and she let me know in no certain terms that was not appropriate. So
Wow.
I had to apologize and we quickly went inside.
I never ever remember my mom getting
Yeah.
mad. Never raising her voice. I don't even remember that particular time that Blaine's talking about, but I never ever remember. I remember her crying at me because I wouldn't mind, or I was teasing Shirley, but she would just cry and then I'd feel bad. And no, I never remember my mom ever.
Did Grandma and Grandpa Lishman did they ever argue or
Never.
fight?
Never heard them say an unkind word to each other.
Your Grandma Margaret was the jewel of the world. Grandpa Lee would bring home people unbeknownst to her for
Yeah.
dinner almost every day.
Yeah,
And,
he would bring people
and
off
she'd-
the street. Come on in, my wife
she'd
will give you
quietly
something
go
to
to
eat.
work and get some stuff. And
And I never, ever in my whole life ever remember having a Sunday dinner just by us.
Just you.
Just our family. Never.
Mel and Jean and
it was yeah,
Wallace and Fanny,
or Herb and Ruby. I mean, it was always something. Skipworth. My mom always had somebody at the table
Max
on
and
Sunday.
Mary.
But you always had good food,
My
right?
Oh yeah, a lot of pork. In fact, nobody can make a pork roast like Grandma Margaret could.
Wow.
Oh, it was just melting.
She always had lots of food, and she always had a dessert. Even in the weekdays, I can remember sitting down at the table and we'd have not much for supper because our big meals were mostly during the day when the guys were working. But I can remember sitting down at night for supper, and she'd always have either bread pudding or she'd have Jello pudding. She'd always have something for, even if it was jam and bread, hot jam and bread. But we always
that was
ended.
quite often.
Always ended the meal with something sweet.
It's interesting too because I have talked to Bernie about this in the past too. Just how growing up on a farm and a ranch the way he did, they're very particular about their meat.
Yeah,
They
they are.
As a kid growing up, Dad, how often did you get steak or roast beef?
Never.
Like you just what did you eat on a regular basis? Because this is the kind of stuff
Very
that we don't think
seldom
about nowadays.
meat of any kind. Very seldom. Always, you'd think I was a vegetarian because we were never fed.
And we always
meat,
had meat.
and they always did.
But my dad would never lower himself to feed us
Hamburger.
hamburger or wieners. Never,
Really?
ever remember growing up and having a hamburger or a wiener. Was always a pork chop or sausage, or it was always something.
Every year they'd slaughter a cow. Every year they'd slaughter a pig, and he would take it, and Grandpa Leo would take it and divide it up with his brothers.
And Shirley and I would fight over the pig's tail as it was roasted in the oven.
Really? Gross.
Anyway,
now-
that's in the book.
So, what about when you answered Mom's, when Mom met Grandma Faye, you've addressed that, but how about when Mom started dating you? How was that received by your parents?
You know what, Brandon? Honestly, I think my mom and dad were so happy to have me out of their hair bed that they were pretty darn happy to have a. Because I was just mischievous. I wasn't bad kid.
No,
But I was always doing tricks and
It
so
was just
my
April Fool's Day every day.
Yep. And
I
so
never felt unwanted or unappreciated. I think the only negative impact that I can remember was Kathy. She and Danny were married long before then, as we dated, and I think she mentioned about one of the lazy Tolmans or something.
yeah, and it was really funny. It's just about a couple of years ago when Shirley and I were down, we were talking, and she was talking about having such a terrible marriage with Danny, and I said to her, "Yeah, you should have waited for some of those lazy Tolmans, Kathy."
Oh, wow. Did she even know what you're talking about?
Oh, of course she did. We all just kind of laughed,
But I never felt that from anybody else, just Kathy. So, but as long as Leo knew that I was willing to work, I was all right in his books. That was the important thing for her, to have a husband that was willing to work.
and not be sick.
Yeah, right.
Not be sick, because the Tolmans were sick a lot.
Yeah. Now, did Grandpa Tolman building that log cabin, did he build anything else? Did he ever build furniture? Did he ever?
Nope.
Did you ever have a piece of furniture
That's
that?
the only thing that I saw him build, and I think Keith helped him a lot with that, if I'm not mistaken. But no, that's the only thing I can remember.
Blaine, he could build the darndest. He could build the darndest milk stools you ever saw.
That tea stool?
Yeah,
He
that
built
tea stool. You betcha.
Now, did Uncle Keith build that really weird white stucco house in
that
Hillspring?
Kim and Lori have.
Yeah. Oh, they still have it?
The interesting part of that is, if you go there, the middle part of that, there's built on this side, built on this side. The middle part, which became their kitchen, was the house that we lived in when I was just a youngster. And it was a block east of Main Street.
Yeah.
And they moved that up to there, and then Keith used that as the centerpiece, and then built on both sides of it.
Now, did they did the log cabin that Grandpa Tolman built, is it still there?
No. I don't even know who knocked it down, and
Yeah.
must have been a joint decision.
But it had a
because-
balcony in it, I remember. We spent the second night of our honeymoon up there.
A balcony?
Remember, it had a loft.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it did.
No,
It had a bed. You walked up the stairs.
But I know. You walk up the stairs. My bedroom was here. There was a curtain here, and Mom's bedroom was there.
But it was upstairs.
Yep, it was
Okay.
upstairs, but
I-
not
I-
a loft. A loft would seem like it was open, which
Okay.
it wasn't.
Okay.
You just meant second story.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, settled. Now, what do you realize now about your parents that you didn't get when you were young?
Oh.
No question in my mind how hard it must have been for my mom
Yeah.
when she got news about Dad's death. I mean, of course, I consoled her, and and she gathered us up, and we shed tears and that, but nothing like.
You don't remember it though, right?
Oh no,
You were two.
no.
When do you think you got it?
1962, I think, when I stood over my dad's grave and saw the inscription that Sergeant Alvin Maximilian Bunnage, husband to Faye, father to Barry and Blaine, and it was almost like, man, I really did have a dad,
Yeah.
and that. But I think that probably would be the biggest thing that I could say was the thing I get now now that we're getting older and we're thinking, wow, what if one of us were gone? What on earth would we do? And I mean, we've lived 58 years together, and Mom and Dad only had just a few short years.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because you caught that in 1962, and I remember when we went to Ortona and we sat down and we started writing letters to Grandpa. as I wrote down those words, like, dear Grandpa, it had occurred to me that I had never addressed him. And I got really choked up. And I remember thinking I wanted to tell you how I was feeling, but I couldn't. I knew I wasn't going to be able to say it without breaking down, and I didn't want to make it, more emotional than it already was. And as I looked over, you were bawling, and on your letterhead, it said, "To my dearest dad," and that's as far as you got. So, anyway, excuse me. So it's sort of that similar realization that I had never addressed him in the first person, and you hadn't either.
No.
So I think it was that same kind of idea that, oh wow, yeah, I do have a grandpa. I've never called him that though.
Yeah.
So, how about you, Mom? What did you despise of? What did you not get about your parents when you were younger, and then as you got older, you're like, okay, I can understand that now.
Well, my dad was a father figure to all his brothers. Could never say no to his brothers, but then it even went on to his kids. He'd never say no to the kids, and you know very well that you
Can't say very much on this now,
I know.
remember?
Well, you know where I was going with it anyway. He could never say no, and I could never just come on. Yes, you can. But now that I've had kids, it's pretty
you
hard.
give everything you can.
You give everything you've got for your kids. It doesn't matter if you go without or whatever. You just can't say no to your kids.
Yep. Well, I don't have a problem with that. My wife does, but I definitely say no to my kids.
Hey, back here was a question I really had a good answer to back here.
Oh,
It
yeah.
says something, a piece of furniture that was in your house.
Well, I asked that.
No.
No, you didn't.
No, I actually did, but no one heard it.
Oh, well, I
I said,
wanna
did
say
he
it.
build any furniture? And then I said, did you guys have any furniture
No furniture.
that you remember? Because I didn't know why you asked that question either. So I'm interested in hearing the answer.
When we lived in Hill Spring, we had this great big old, huge. It was in the 1900s piano, but all of the back part of the piano where you set your music was
Yeah.
all stained glass.
Oh,
Yeah.
what happened to that?
It was so heavy, Brandon, that we couldn't, and Mom and Dad had no reason to take it to Cardston. They didn't have a big enough house, and all of us had pianos, and so it ended up going to Lynn and Carol Winder's house.
Oh, was that right? I didn't know that.
But it was it was huge and it was heavy. It never moved an inch in that house. You worked around. It never got changed around when Mom changed around the furniture. That piano stayed in the very same place it was because it was so heavy. But it was beautiful. You walked in, it was black. It was quite, and it wasn't really shiny, but it wasn't dull. But the stained glass behind it, I've never seen anything like it since, and I've never seen anything like it.
Had a nice sound, too.
Yeah, it did.
It's funny too because we always have this. We've grown up thinking that the Tolman family is so musical, and I know you play piano. Was there music in your home growing up? A lot. Did Grandma
yeah.
play music?
No, my mom didn't, but
But Grandpa
Kathy-
Leo used to.
yeah,
No.
he could sing his heart out. No, Kathy played a bit, but Ramona sang. Ramona took singing lessons, and she had quite a soprano voice, didn't she,
Beautiful
Blaine?
voice, yeah.
Yeah, and I think didn't she sing with the
For a while. The
and when
Tabernacle Choir.
The Tabernacle Choir. She's got quite a voice.
Wow.
I remember when they went to Jerusalem. Remember that she got chosen out of all those people on that tour to sing "I Walk Today Where Jesus Walked," and it just echoed through all the canyons, and they chose her to sing it.
Oh wow.
So she was quite a singer.
I don't even think I knew that.
Didn't ya?
No.
She's quite a singer. She sang in a trio with Rachel
Merrill.
and
Janet Jackson.
Janet Jackson and herself, and they sang a lot together. Funerals, parties, yeah. She was she had a good soprano voice. I don't know if she was like Max and could hear the harmony and everything.
Or
and,
Jody can hear the harmony,
yeah,
too,
But I don't know if her voice was
I
like
would
that, but
bet
she had a
she
real
could.
high soprano voice.
Did Uncle Bob sing a lot?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
Sing, you mean?
okay. So next part, I was thinking we actually could break this up into pieces and press pause here and then we can do episode 2 and go on to home and schooling in just
Okay.
a second.